In today's episode, we are going to be talking about strum patterns on the guitar. What's the theory, what's the idea, what's the approach, and how do you figure out what is the best tactic and method for creating a good strum pattern. So we're going to look at a few examples. We're going to talk about some ideas. Let's just jump right on in, right? So first off, we need to talk about why strum patterns are important. Strum patterns are important because you want to develop a certain level of consistency, and you want to make sure that, even if you accidentally hit a chord when you're not supposed to, you're doing it in time. That's going to be a much easier mistake to try and cover up, as opposed to if you don't have a great sense of time, you're making mistakes that are out of time, right? It creates a tighter, more consistent experience. So what's the idea behind it, right? Well, you want to think of your hand like a pendulum. You want to think of it as if it was, like a pendulum on a grandfather clock, right? It's just, you're always moving, always strumming back and forth at the same time. Your hand quite literally becomes the metronome, and then you're simply deciding based on the rhythm that you want to achieve what the most appropriate, what you should be doing is either a downstroke or an upstroke, right? A lot of times you see the pros, they're sitting there and it just looks like their hand is going back and forth, and that basically is all that's happening. Their hand is just going back and forth, and they're just deciding when do they hit and when do they not hit. So the most common example that I see is you'll see a song and it'll show like a pattern for your hands, and usually a quarter note is supposed to represent your downstroke, and the eighth notes, the pairing of an eighth note, the first eighth note is always going to be your downbeat, and the second eighth note represents your upbeat. A simpler way of saying that is the numbers should always be represented by a downbeat, and the ands, the in-between beats, should always be represented by an up. Now you can subdivide this a little bit by swapping, to eighth notes and 16th notes, which we'll look at an example of that at the end. But for now, let's start with a real basic example. So at the bottom of the screen here, I will have an example. It's a couple of quarter notes, right? So we have a measure of just quarter notes and then a measure of just eighth notes. And the way that this would translate, this would be a C chord. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And all four of those beats, because they land right on the numbers, will be represented with a downstroke, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But when I switch over to the eighth notes, now the tempo increases, or at least the how often my hits happen are twice as fast. And so we're still doing the downs for the 1, 2, 3, 4s, but the ands, the second half of those eighth notes, always comes with an upstroke instead. So now instead it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And so a good way, if you're not familiar with, creating a good pattern with your hands, with your strumming hand, you want to just practice going back and forth between these two exercises. So you want to, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Simple enough like that. Always best done with a metronome, but that's your goal. That's your basic, starting points, is you want to get good at that. Now we can take a look at a second example. Another example would be, something like this one that I have at the bottom of the screen here. So this is just simply a measure long, and you just want to practice this one measure over and over and over again, preferably without stopping. You have a quarter note at the front, so that's your 1, and that leads into our pair of eighth notes, 2 and, another quarter note, 3, and then another pair of eighth notes, 4 and. So the strum pattern for this would look like down, down, up, down, down, up. So here would be a quick example of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and. And notice how throughout that whole entire run, my hand was just a constant machine, right? Just always going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, right? But that's the idea. That's that level of consistency you want. You don't want to have like 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and... You see how my hand stops in between that? It's really, really awkward, and that can get you into some trouble, and especially if you're trying to play at a really high level where you want a really tight playing style. It's going to be really tough to achieve that, and you're really fighting an uphill battle by doing it like that. You want to, overwrite your instincts and get to the point where, you're following that strum pattern all the time, so that way your hand is just always in motion, the same motion over and over and over again. Example number 3, similar but not quite the same. This time we start off with 2 quarter notes at the beginning, so 1, 2, and then a pair of eighth notes, 2 pairs of eighth notes after that, 3 and 4 and. So that strum pattern turns into 1, 2, 3 and 4 and, or down, 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 up, down, up. So here's what that'll sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and down, 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 up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up. Okay, let's look at a slightly harder example. So in this example, we have a tie that comes into play here. And if you don't know how ties work, ties are basically, the idea is like you're gluing 2 notes together. So if you glue 2 eighth notes together, you basically get a quarter note. But there's certain rules inside of music, like in this case, there's the imaginary bar line. You don't want to cut off, like you don't want anything that crosses over that midway point into 3. So here they would say, like, the good penmanship would be to have a couple of eighth notes and then to tie across the middle of the measure here. So in this case, we have 1, 2 and then the 3 is tied into, so we don't play across that, and then and 4 and. And so this kind of creates an interesting scenario where you actually have 2 upstrokes back to back, right? Because the downstrokes would all happen on 1, 2, 4, but these ands that happen here, the and after 2 and the and after 3, those are both upstrokes, and we don't play anything during the 3. You might have like an imaginary downstroke in there, all right, because your hand is still always moving. But yeah, you're going to get 2 upstrokes back to back, and so that's a little bit of an unnatural sensation for some people, but yeah, this is what that would sound like, right? So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 and 4 and 1, 2 and 4 and down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. Okay. Good. So let's go with one final example here. We're going to work in 6/8, and in 6/8, we're still going to follow the same rules, right? The downstrokes happen on the beats, and the upstrokes happen on the ands. But in 6/8, the 8 at the bottom is telling us that the eighth note is now what's worth 1 beat. So where before, quarter notes were the beats. Now eighth notes are the beats, which means that the 16th notes kind of take the place of what the old eighth notes used to do when we were in 4/4. So here we have a pattern: 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and. That's our strum pattern here, right? So that's down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. All right, let's hear a little bit of what that might sound like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. So there is a whole litany of obviously different strum patterns that you can do. This is just a few examples, but I wanted to give you enough that, hopefully the idea sinks in about how you would calculate these things and hopefully why it's important. You should really be diligent about it. It seems like one of those things that's very, very difficult at first, but if you spend a couple months and you really make sure that you get this down and just try to develop that natural flow, then you'll be surprised how many other strum patterns just start to kind of come naturally. You're not struggling to keep a nice consistent time. So anyways, that'll do it for right now. Hope you guys have been tuning in here. I apologize, it's been a little bit of a break since the last video has come out. I had some things happen at home, life happens. But hey, we're still rolling on. We're still playing music, and we're still rocking out in the lessons program. So anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Alex Bennett, and I will see you guys in the next video.